for flying to these areas. Restaurants, meanwhile, are stuck with takeouts and deliveries under GCQ, but they can open their doors to dine-in customers in areas under modified GCQ. And the government puts more buses along Commonwealth after commuters were stuck along the major thoroughfare because of limited transport options. Senator Nancy Binay dares transport officials to take public transportation so they'll experience what it's like for regular persons out there. Domestic flights are now allowed under the general community quarantine, but airlines need to check with the LGU first if they're cleared to fly to these areas. Gerard de la Peña with the details.
Passenger Reca Orias came to NAIA Terminal 3 as early as 4 a.m. to catch an 11:30 a.m. flight to General Santos City. Orias said she has been stranded in Manila since March when she was supposed to fly to Saudi Arabia to work. She wanted to go home to Jensen this morning now that the area is under GCQ, but she was not aware that her flight has been cancelled.
Nakikisabay lang din kami kasi walang sasakyan papuntang airport. Hinatid lang kami nung asawa ng attorney. Kaya po, dinrap niya kami dito. Tapos, yun lang, nalaman namin na cancel pala yung flight. Hindi naman nagsabi agad yung.
Anthony and his wife knew their flight has been cancelled before going to the airport, but they proceeded anyway, hoping that they can somehow manage to find a flight to Mindanao after more than 2 months of being stranded in Nueva Ecija.
Hirap na kasi may dalawa pa kaming anak na iwan sa Mindanao. Yung hirap talaga, yun ang pinakamahirap.
The 3 big local carriers released flight schedules this week as soon as the government announced that Metro Manila will be placed under general community quarantine. But the Civil Aeronautics Board said airlines still need clearance from the IATF to fly to certain destinations. The CAB tells airlines to coordinate first with the local government units of their destinations as policies on arriving passengers vary from one place to another.
Because of the eagerness of our airlines to start up operations, merong nag-set na ng flight kahapon. Ngayon, it turned out na medyo kailangan pa ng clearance sa IATF, which was obtained naman quickly when the IATF met yesterday. Ang nangyari, nung ang airlines ay mag-announce ng kanilang initial flight ng June 1, hindi pa ito na-clear sa IATF. Kahapon pa lang na-clear ng IATF. So, ito naman ay naayos na ngayon at na-clear ng IATF na pwede na doon sa mga GCQ to GCQ.
The miscommunication caused the cancellation of the only scheduled domestic flight today.
So, alinsunod sa patakaran ng IATF, kailangan po ng approval ng IATF for any flight, and we were not able to get that approval as of late last night, kaya napilitan kami na i-cancela na muna yung flight for today.
Cebu Pacific announced that they are now free to mount flights to and from General Santos, Cagayan de Oro, Laguindingan, and Naga City. Philippine Airlines said they will also be flying to domestic destinations starting tomorrow. The flag carrier has also resumed flights to the US starting Monday. Philippines Air Asia, on the other hand, said it will resume flights to Cebu and Cagayan de Oro on June 5. The airport authority meanwhile noted that it will choreograph flight movements with physical distancing in mind.
We will not lump into 1 hour yung lahat ng flights. Ilalagay ho natin sa tamang slot, tamang schedules. Maybe siguro in an hour's time, meron lang siguro tayong 5 o 6 na flights na dumarating para ho hindi tayo magkasiksikan.
Carrier said delays and schedule changes should be expected on the gradual resumption of flights.
Because this is still a developing situation, talagang very fluid pa po ang mga bagay. So we are asking for patience and understanding dahil wala pa tayo talaga dun sa dating operasyon natin. And so itong lahat ng to ay kailangan natin i-properly coordinate sa mga otoridad.
Stranded passengers were eventually flown to General Santos in the afternoon through a special repatriation flight. Those flying to the provinces should be aware of the requirements of the LGUs of their destination, such as medical certificates and travel passes, among others. For News 5, Gerard de la Peña, we are One News.
Public buses are not supposed to be out on the road just yet, but on Tuesday, the MMDA asked operators to send a few buses to Commonwealth Quezon City. Greg Gregorio tells us why.
Under Phase 1 of the implementation of the general community quarantine in Metro Manila, public utility vehicles such as buses and jeepneys are still banned on the road. But as of today, the government has allowed about 500 buses to service the Angat Quezon Avenue route.
Nagkaroon po tayo ng calibrated response sa sitwasyon po sa kahabaan ng Commonwealth. Dahil po maraming mga pasahero ang stranded po dun kahapon. Ang mga existing bus stops po ng MMDA ang ima-maximize po ng mga buses na manggagaling po ng Angat going to Quezon Avenue. So yun po yung ima-maximize, no? At maaari pong mag-load at unload.
However, bus operators only committed to deploy 40 units, and based on actual monitoring, only 6 buses actually hit the road this morning. Even though this trip is just until Quezon Avenue, it is already a big help to Johari Kali, who works as a security guard in Manila. Before this, he had to walk from Commonwealth all the way to EDSA.
Kaysa naman lakarin, at least na medyo nalapitan ka kahit paano.
But because physical distancing is required in all modes of transportation, buses can only carry half of their normal capacity. Passengers are constantly reminded to follow minimum health standards such as using face masks and using alcohol, especially that most buses have yet to set up cashless payment platforms. Commuters are likewise advised to be extra patient because there are buses who will refuse those whose body temperature reads above 37 degrees Celsius. But this rule irked several passengers.
Hindi ba nila naisip, naglakad kami, pinawisan kami, mainit yung nilakad namin. At least, i-consider nila yon kasi wala kaming mga sakit. Mainit lang talaga yung pinanggalingan namin. Sabi ko nga sa konduktor ba yun, mag-rest kami sandali, hindi daw pwede. Alis na sila. Ganun.
This route has a fixed 25 peso fare. Their presence on the road could have provided relief to some commuters, but for Glenn, they're not really as convenient.
Ang mahirap doon yung point to point lang. Meron silang designated na babaan. Kaso malayo din kung minsan. Kagaya ko, pupunta ako ng City Hall. Quezon Ave yung daanan. Di mapapalayo ako sa parang malayong lalakarin ko kung ganon.
The MMDA explains that their decision to allow 500 bus units to service the Angat Quezon Avenue route doesn't mean they're blind to other areas where passengers were left stranded.
Tayo po ay kapapasok pa lang sa DCQ. Unti-unti pa lang po tayong gumagalaw, nagbubukas, no? So, maging ang mga public transportation po ay limited. Hindi po ibig sabihin na hindi naman natin i-address yung kulang sa ibang lugar.
Meanwhile, the LFRB has allowed about 100 buses to ply the Dasmariñas Cavite Heritage Hotel Pasay route. For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
Now here are the other big stories today. Senators called out the Transportation Department for what they consider as poor planning and lack of foresight as Metro Manila shifts to GCQ. Senator Nancy Binay, for one, did not mince words, challenging transportation officials to try commuting from their homes to their new office in New Clark City. The lawmaker dared them to experience what it's like for ordinary people. She added that the DOTR's policy to ban traditional jeepneys is unrealistic, anti-commuter, and anti-worker. She explained that if jeepneys are not allowed to operate, around 250,000 Filipinos would be abandoned, with their children suffering the most. In response, Transportation Secretary Art Tugade urged lawmakers to understand the temporary ban on traditional jeepneys. The DOTR chief says the government ranked the country's transportation options to determine which ones would give the most benefit and pose the least risk if used at a time like this. Unfortunately, jeepneys figured at the bottom of this hierarchy. But Tugade said this does not mean they will never be allowed to ferry passengers again.
Meron ho tayong hierarchy of transport modalities. Ibig ho bang sabihin, forever hindi na magagamit yung traditional jeepney? Hindi ho. Hindi ho forever hindi magagamit yan. Kung kakapusin ang instrument of transportation, pwede hong ipasok yung jeepney dyan. Bakit ho nasa ilalim ng hierarchy yung jeepney? Una ho, the health and safety components are there. Pangalawa ho, yung hirap ng social distancing. Ang pangatlo ho, yung tinatawag na roadworthiness.
Travel authority will no longer be required for trips within Metro Manila or within provinces. Task Force Commander Guillermo Eleazar says the document will only be required for those going outside the metro or outside the provinces. The power to grant travel authority has also been delegated to local police commanders to simplify the process. Authority for cross-province trips may be secured from local police chiefs, while those crossing regional borders will require authority from the provincial director. We'll pause for a short break, but when the big story returns, confusion greeted a few passengers today at the NAIA after their flight was canceled. And the health department will only report fresh coronavirus infections once laboratories are able to submit needed information on time. I'm Jess De Los Santos, and you're watching The Big Story. Food shops are stuck with takeouts and deliveries in areas under GCQ. But for those under modified GCQ, they can now welcome diners to eat inside the establishment, subject, of course, to certain conditions. Maricel Halili tells us more about this.
Restaurants in Modified General Community Quarantine or MGCQ areas can finally allow dine-in customers. For the past 2 months, they were limited to takeout and delivery services. But the Trade Department has issued minimum health protocols that they must follow.
Pwede pa ring ipasara ang outlet kapag hindi sumusunod sa tinakda ng DTI at DOT na siyang maglalagay ng post-audit mechanism. Sa mga lugar na dineklara na nasa ilalim ng Modified General Community Quarantine, dine-in restaurants ay pinapayagan mag-operate ng 50% capacity simula June 1, 2020. Pero sa lugar na nasa ilalim ng GCQ, pakihintay po ang announcement para sa mga date ng reopening.
For non-single-use menu restaurants, all customers must be escorted to their assigned table that comes with a corresponding number. The customer will give his order to the server while maintaining a distance of 1 meter. The DTI encourages diners to immediately pay for their food upon ordering. But both customer and server must sanitize their hands when the transaction is completed. The agency also bans buffets, self-serve areas for food bars, condiments, and utensils. The restaurant must also provide a designated area takeaway and pick-up orders. There must be separate sinks for kitchen staff and dine-in customers. The DTI also encourages cashless payments to minimize infections. But if a customer pays in cash, then the restaurant should provide a small tray for the customer to drop his payment. Food shops are likewise ordered to regularly sanitize high-contact areas like doorknobs and tables. Unlike dining operations, religious gatherings remain suspended. The Interagency Task Force has actually discussed proposals from different churches during Monday's meeting. Unfortunately, none were approved.
Nagkaroon po ng desisyon na hindi muna po papayagan ang mass gathering for religious purposes. I cannot say when mapapayagan po yan, pero titignan po natin ang datos. titignan po natin kung ang case doubling rate, titignan po natin ang preparedness for critical care. No? Pero sa ngayon po, hindi pa po papayagan ang mass gathering for religious purposes.
Barbershops and salons will also reopen in GCQ and MGCQ areas come June 7, but they are ordered to limit the numbers of customers inside the establishments. Meanwhile, the Trade Department appeals to bike and gadget sellers to be reasonable in adjusting prices, especially that the country is still in a crisis.
Pakiusap natin sana doon sa mga both the business side na nagbebenta nitong mga ganitong produkto at sa consumers na kung magtataas po ng presyo ang negosyo para sa bike or laptops, kung pwede po yung reasonable increases lang na hindi masyadong malaki, na masyadong masakit for the consumer dahil we understand na kailangan nila rin makabawi dun sa mga losses nila for the past 2.5 months. Pero hindi po para pagsamantalahan na natin ang consumers.
DTI also warns online sellers to follow the suggested retail price for basic commodities or face sanctions. For News 5, Maricel Halili, we are One News.
New coronavirus infections in the country jumped on Tuesday. The Health Department reported 359 new cases, 176 of which were fresh, while 183 were late. So far, almost 19,000 people have been infected with SARS-CoV-2 in the Philippines. Meanwhile, 6 more persons lost the fight to the coronavirus. The death toll now stands at 966. The DOH also reported at least 80 new recoveries on Tuesday. More than 4,000 patients have survived COVID-19 in the Philippines. The Health Department is now waiting for the last 4 laboratories that have yet to submit a complete list of their pending test results. Once the agency has received those reports, they would no longer report any late cases. To give us a detailed explanation about this, we have with us Jen Calimon live from Malabon. Jen, Yusek Vergere explained how the case validation process leads to late reporting of cases. Can you give us a rundown of this process?
Well, Jess, DOH Undersecretary Rosette Vergere during the virtual presser this afternoon explained the process of the submission and validation of cases from the laboratories. First, the laboratory sends full line list of positive patients to the Epidemiology Bureau. Second, the Epidemiology Bureau will identify and remove duplicate entries or errors in encoding. Third, the Epidemiology Bureau will then identify new confirmed cases that have not been previously encoded in their system. And last, the Bureau will identify unique positive individuals per laboratories and will compare it to their system. There will be 2 kinds of tagging. First is tag correctly as unique first case reported by the laboratory, and second is tagged as having been first tested and reported in another laboratory. Jess.
Well, Jen, at the same time, we have the DOH saying that they would only have to report fresh cases once this backlog has been resolved. How would this affect the DOH's case reporting?
Well, just the DOH is hoping that all laboratories in the country would be able to submit all the information needed so they can provide more accurate numbers. If the DOH would be able to get all the details from all the laboratories, only fresh cases will be reported daily, which could give us a clearer picture of the COVID situation in the country. And this would also be used as a basis to know if the COVID response in the country is improving or working. Jess?
Could you also clarify for us the country's actual testing capacity as of the moment? How is it different from the so-called rated capacity of the country?
Just the DOH explained that actual testing capacity is different from rated capacity. Rated or targeted capacity is the theoretical capacity of a laboratory, or tests that it can make if there will be no other factors or operational issues along the way. As of today, Jess, our rated capacity is 34,000 tests per day. However, Jess, some laboratories cannot reach this number because of some operational issues and problems. On the other hand, actual testing capacity is based on daily testing output which laboratories can make. So right now we have 8,000 to 9,000 actual daily capacity, which is a very big improvement compared to less than 1,000 tests per day before. The highest was recorded last May 16, which reached 11,127 tests per day. Jess?
All right, thank you for those updates. That was Jen Calimon reporting to us live from Malabon. The Supreme Court thumbs down lawyer Larry Gadon's petition for prohibition and the issuance of a temporary restraining order in connection with the grant of a provisional authority to operate in favor of ABS-CBN. The Supreme Court en banc said Gadon failed to comply with the requisites for judicial review and that he had no legal standing to file the petition. The SC also reminded Gadon that filing cases before the Supreme Court is a serious affair and it should never be contemplated by one who admits not suffering any legal injury. Lastly, the SC said Gadon could have been more circumspect and that he will benefit from more restraint and a huge dose of humility. We'll be back with more stories after the break. Stay with us here on One News. To discuss the Bayanihan to Recover as One Act, which, among others, would provide subsidies to more sectors affected by the ongoing health crisis. Senate President Tito Soto says the bill is expected to be passed on Thursday. Mean Los Baños with the story.
The government will continue to provide emergency subsidy of up to 8,000 pesos to low-income households under the Bayanihan to Recover as One Act, which is currently being debated in the plenary. Critically impacted displaced workers will also be eligible. These include probationary, project-based, seasonal, contractual, and casual employees, freelancers, self-employed, and repatriated OFWs. All public health workers, meanwhile, will be provided with a special risk allowance on top of the hazard pay. For public and private health workers who have contracted COVID-19 while in the line of duty, they will be given 100,000 pesos as compensation. 1 million pesos shall be given to the families of those who have died because of the disease. This provision has retroactive application from February 1, 2020. For the education sector, qualified students in private colleges who did not receive government assistance shall receive a tuition subsidy of 8,000 pesos, while qualified students in private elementary and high schools will be entitled for a 3,000 peso assistance. Under the bill, a one-time cash assistance of up to 8,000 pesos shall also be provided to affected and displaced teaching and non-teaching personnel in private basic and tertiary education institutions. Part-time faculty in state colleges will also receive aid. For the transportation sector, the Transportation Department will coordinate the accelerated distribution of remaining subsidy under the Social Amelioration Program. The bill also instructs the agency that there shall be no phase-out at the national and local level. Meanwhile, there shall be 30-day grace period for the payment of loans to banks and financing companies. Payment for the utility bills and credit cards with due date falling under the Enhanced Community Quarantine and MECQ shall be extended for 30 more days. Same goes to residential rentals. The Senate version of the bill introduced introduces 236 billion peso standby fund to be allocated to various agencies. Among them is a 30 billion peso funding for the procurement of PCR testing and extraction kits, among others. The bill also directs the Health Department to have adequate number of COVID-19 testing centers. It also seeks to expedite the procurement of PPEs, gloves, gowns, and other protective gears to be distributed to facilities designated as COVID-19 referral hospitals. For News 5 Mean Los Baños, we are One News.
Protests continue to grip the United States as demonstrators clash with authorities in several cities across the nation. 4 officers were shot in St. Louis, Missouri, when what was a peaceful demonstration suddenly turned violent on Monday evening. The police department tweeted early Tuesday that the officers were taken to a hospital. Their injuries are believed to be not life-threatening. It's still unclear who had fired the shots. The chaos in St. Louis followed continued protests Monday in Missouri over the death of George Floyd and police treatment of African Americans. George Floyd's brother has called for calm in the wake of widespread unrest after his sibling's death. Terrence Floyd pleaded with a crowd in Minneapolis, urging them to protest peacefully.
Educate yourself and know who you're voting for. And that's how we gonna hit them. Because it's a lot of us. It's a lot of us.
That's right.
It's a lot of us.
It's a lot of us.
And we still gonna do this peacefully. Because that's when we gonna get them. Let's switch it up, y'all. Let's switch it up.
Yes. Amen.
Do this peacefully.
An opera singer in Cuba has found a new audience to perform his arias for, since concert halls are still closed due to COVID-19. Andres Sanchez, a 26-year-old tenor, sings to his neighbors and nearby medical personnel from his balcony every week. Sanchez usually belts out songs of Andrea Bocelli and other Latin artists, and he says it's an opportunity to practice his vocation and provide a little entertainment during this difficult time. This just crossing our wires, the abrogation of the Visiting Forces Agreement has been suspended. Foreign Affairs Secretary Teddy Boy Locsin says he has issued a diplomatic note informing Washington about the suspension upon President Duterte's instruction. And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. I'm Jess De Los Santos. We are One News. Good evening.